So, once again, my name is Sadhvi Aparna. I am a longtime student and now teacher within Acharya Shunya's lineage. And we are coming together to explore the Bhaja Govindam. And this is a companion study course that helps us to hone our contemplations. This is called Mananam in Sanskrit. And this is all based on not only the original text by Adi Shankaracharya, but also Acharya Shunya's 6-month-long teaching on this, which you can also find on our YouTube channel, on Acharya Shunya YouTube channel. And I highly encourage you to explore all of those teachings in depth. And that is where this is coming from. And these are my own contemplations. And as students of Advaita Vedanta, we come with our open hearts and we receive the knowledge, and then we sit and we churn it and we contemplate it on it. And then eventually, with enough contemplation, we begin and testing of this in our lived experience and with others in right community, which we'll be talking about today. We then get to integrate this knowledge. So, a quick series outline. In this limited series, we're going to be exploring 8 themes, and you can go back to that, that arise in this text, which is also known as the Moha Mudgara, or the hammer of our delusions. And those 8 themes, there's 4 key ways in which we stay trapped in samsara, or a delusion of our separateness from self. And then there's 4 key ways in which we might find some liberation from this delusion and this samsara. So I will mention a few verses with each of these teachings that you can go back to and explore in depth to contemplate on specific themes. And there's many themes. You may have your own themes, but here we're exploring these. All right. So today we are going to start the beginning of our picking up. What are we picking up? We've been focusing on what we're letting go. Today we're going to be focusing on the first of these 4 themes that we are picking up. So today we're going to be talking about the value of Sat, or that truth of the eternal self. We're talking about Sangha, or our community of truth, being in right community with other people who are aware of this community and this truth. And then who is giving us this knowledge? Where is this knowledge coming from? It's coming from Guru, or the teacher who is stable in that truth. And we are paying special attention to verses 9, 13, 30, and 32. And as you look through this picking up slide, you'll see that some of these verses are going to come up again, especially verse 30. So we aren't going to go too much into depth on verse 30 itself today, or even 32, although we are touching on them. But today we are going to pay special attention to verse 9. All right. Today itself, you can fast forward to the next slide. Today itself, we have just passed a very important anniversary date for all seekers of Advaita Vedanta, for the knowledge, the jnanam of the path of the self. There is a special birth anniversary that is celebrated, and that is of the author of this text, Adi Shankaracharya. And I think we're at over 1,200 years now of that celebration of his birth. This is a person who lived for about 32 years, and we honor the Guru in this tradition. This is what that opening prayer was. We were honoring those teachers that came before us, that carefully brought us this knowledge from thousands of years ago. And this is one of those teachers. It's Adi Shankaracharya. And through him and our direct lineage, we have this knowledge, and through our teacher. So I thought it would be especially auspicious today. And this is a beautiful to chant this verse, and it will help to kind of ground us in what we're talking about today. So as we honor the Guru, what are we honoring? We are honoring that source of light that is bringing us the truth. We're going to go into what does that look like and how is that represented and what are we honoring when we honor the Guru today. So, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahm, Tasmaye Shri Guruve Namaha. Guru is Brahma, that creative force. Guru is Vishnu, that sustaining force. Guru is the Supreme Lord Shiva, that dissolving force. Guru is both manifest reality and the absolute. So we might experience the Guru, the teacher, in a physical body. And what we're also experiencing is the absolute, that absolute knowledge of the self that comes through us, through Shastra, through Guru, through the sacred text, through that sacred jnanam or knowledge, and through the individual person. So salutations to that glorious Guru. So that principle, that Guru principle that comes to us, that helps to give us knowledge, create that information, create that awareness, and helps us to sustain our presence in this very chaotic samsaric world, this jagat, this world of physical reality, and then helps us to dissolve that illusion that tells us that there's only this physical reality. And those principles, they come through this knowledge and they come through the teacher. So we honor that guru, that principle. And today we also honor our teacher, Acharya Shunya, and we're grateful. Yeah. All right. So, as I see your beautiful shining faces, it's so lovely to see you all today. If you feel comfortable sharing your video, if you're attending live, that would be wonderful. And if you don't, that's all right too. If you are joining us on the recording, welcome to you as well. You can find more of these teachings on our YouTube channel. You can also find more information, more of the written materials, and more supporting material and community in our Vedic study circle. So I welcome you to join that. It is free of charge. And it is a membership and donation based, and also without, you can come and go as you find yourself drawn to this knowledge. So, welcome. And there's a lot more in our private Vedic Study Circle community forum and member portal. So, here we are today. How is everyone feeling? I'd like to hear in the chat. How are you feeling with this knowledge? We've come through a lot of letting goes. Has anyone experienced, does anyone feel a little more stable in their letting go of what you've been letting go? So we've been letting go of our worldly attachments. We've been letting those land a little bit more softly in our life without becoming so identified with them, so attached. So this disassociation with our worldly attachments can mean our disidentification with things like our material acquisitions, even our relationships, the knowledge that our senses are bringing back to us. We can be a little less attached to the comings and goings of the impermanent. Has anybody noticed that they are experiencing even a little bit less association with their everyday experience of reality? Shweta shares in the chat that this has been such a direct teaching that she's felt her ego slowly dissolving. Yes, we're slowly letting that tight identification, that tight grasping go. Deborah shares definitely more aware of her attachments and also of how she can step back from them. Yeah. Yeah, being aware of the attachments first is the key, right? That's why we're told very definitively in this text, set this aside, this is a trap, let it go, because we need that. Everything around us in material physical reality is telling us this is real. And so it helps to have these hammers. This is the Moha Mudgara. So it's a hammer against these delusions. These verses are like chipping away at all of this. Zaina shares that it feels like layers of pulling back from attachment. Yeah, it's not always right at once. It can be layers of, like the onion, we're just peeling back. She feels that she's softening the grip on her relationships and other people. Their absence doesn't feel so painful. Yeah, sometimes as we learned, we're identifying not only with sukha, with those pleasurable things, the presence of our relationships, but also dukkha, the absence or the pain that results from the absence of these things that we want. Pragya is sharing it's easier to notice her attachments and then to let them go. And David shares lately he's feeling a little more often than not a loosening of those attachments. Yeah. So our awareness is helping us we're bringing more awareness. We've contemplated on some of these pitfalls of samsara, and that's allowing us to have more discernment. And then that's viveka. And then from that discernment, we can start to make different or better choices. Right. Right. Kalyani shares there's an ease which comes when she's consciously pulling back from the world and resting in the sakshi, or the witness, the inner witness self. And Marika shares the act of letting go has become more clear to me. Finding myself hitting a wall is not always fun, but the tools from these teachings and the path to unlock the mind conditionings are helping her a lot. She's so grateful. And Rochelle shares she's working hard at letting go of more material items with less attachment and examining why I am detached. Focusing on sattva. Yeah, I think it's important also, it's in sort of in these circles of spiritual community, we might not acknowledge how material acquisitions are still a part of our life, but they are. It's nearly impossible to function in this reality without being aware and without grasping on to material acquisitions as safety. So when we start to see that, I think we're all probably experiencing that. And also learning to okay, well, maybe my safety does not reside in any of these things, including material acquisitions, including relationships. Where is my safety coming from? Zaina shares too, I'm wondering about the difference between enjoying the body, like abhyanga and perfumes, for example, versus being too attached and immersed. Yeah, there are specific contexts in which we can talk about those things. And I would highly encourage you to anyone who's wondering these same things to go and explore some of the teachings that are on our Vedic Study Circle and the member portal on cultivating sattva. So we have individual practices on how we cultivate sattva. And one of the ways we do it is also in cultivating health with dharmic sensory choices, right? So there are ways in which we can, and what is sattva? Sattva is that state of the mind which enables us to engage with these teachings in a clear manner. It's that presence, that inner calmness of the mind. This is not specifically identifying with Govindam in this case, but it's being in a ripe presence of mind that we can actually start to have that discernment. So there are practices, physical practices that we can do. And I believe it's verse 30 that'll give us some of these physical practices. But also Ayurveda gives us many physical practices that help us to calm down those states of being that make it harder to be in that calm and stable mind. So that whether that's Abhyanga, which is that beautiful practice of oiling the body for health and stability, which brings physical stability, or perfumes, which help us which are pleasant to smell. In this text, what we're asked to do is, again, within the context of a life that is lived in society. We are grahastas, right? We are householders. We acknowledge we have bodies, we have relationships, we have work, we have engagements with society. And so within that, we do care for this body, but we're asked in this text to not to not care for the body, not to not have pleasure, dharmic pleasure, but to pull back just a little and see how how much we're identifying with those pleasures, with that seeking, with that sense gratification. And is that leading us a little bit farther from our ability to be stable and centered and perceive truth? And so I think less it's a matter of self-care. Am I doing something wrong here? But what is the quality of those senses? First, we start with what is the quality of our sense gratification? If we're choosing to gratify our senses, as we talked about in the last class, if we're choosing to gratify our senses, and the first step is like, well, let's not gratify our senses with things that cause harm to ourselves or others, right? So for example, in the case of perfume, are they natural, are they natural products? Are they not full of, chemicals which can physically harm us? Are they ethically sourced? These are ways that you could contemplate. Is this first a choice that isn't harming others or myself? And then how much am I pursuing them? How much am I going after that? Is it a scent that, for example, is it a scent that pulls my attention away from my meditation or pulls my attention away? There was one of the ways in which I think it was the analogy of maybe it was the bee that gets trapped by the scent of something, that Acharya Shunya gave us a story in these teachings around the bee that gets trapped in the scent of the lotus, and she finds herself endlessly pursuing the scent and thinking oh, I still have time, I still have time. And then there was this beautiful story of how the bee then gets trapped in the lotus as it closes up for the night. And then the bee's still thinking, but I still have this great scent and it's delicious and I'm okay because it's going to open and I'll be free. And then, but I have time, I have time, I have time. And then the next day and the next morning, an elephant comes along and swoops up that lotus flower and eats it. And then, so we see an instance of where we can get trapped by, we think we have all this time, and that plays so well into the Bhaja Govindam. We think we have all this time to enjoy the pleasures of our senses, even the scent. And is it leading us into a state of dulled, you know, of unconsciousness? Is it leading us into a state of temporary pleasure because we think that will be permanent without realizing that everything can shift and that we have a limited time in this experience? So just a reminder, even from Acharya Shunya's teachings through this Bhaja Govindam, is that yes, any sense can lead us astray. So if you haven't yet watched or participated in the last companion study, we talked a lot about senses and how they can lead us astray. So thank you, Zaina, for that question. Finally, Selham says he's learning more acceptance of what is and not being attached to time or things I can't control. Yes, we haven't explicitly talked about time, except in the context of the whole Bhaja Govindam, right? All of this text is saying, wake up now, quickly, quickly. There's a verse today that talks about quickly get yourself into the right action and the right community, because our time here is limited and we have no control or mastery. As Soham's saying, he's not being attached to that time because he has no control over it. And also because we have no control over it, we must take advantage of this moment to bring ourselves back into awareness, back away from these distractions and back to self. And how do we do that? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. How do we bring ourselves back? Finally, we have some relief. We've been working to let things go, and finally we have some relief in verse 9. Can you bring up the slide? Thank you, Kalyani. All right. This is a big verse. So we're going to spend most of our time together today talking and exploring this verse, verse 9 of Bhaja Govindam. From Satsangha, the company of good people, comes non-attachment. And then from non-attachment comes the freedom from delusion. And from this freedom of delusion, it leads to a self-settledness. And then from that self-settledness comes jivan mukti, or that freedom, that liberation from our samsarically identified personality into a true awareness of self. So let's sit with that slide even and sit with that. I want you to repeat this in your own words, in your own mind, just for a few seconds. From Satsanga, the company of good people, comes non-attachment. From non-attachment comes freedom from delusion. This leads to self-settledness, being settled in the self. And then from this self-settledness comes jivan mukti, liberation. All right. When you sat with that, did that move something for you? Yes or no? Yes. We can see also just by becoming present, even with this verse, something shifts just by sitting with one verse. We can see a path. There's a light that shines on the path of Shreyas, that light that shines on the path back to self, back to that self-realization. So up until now, we have been really focusing on these hammers and of this moha mudra and every kind of attachment that we're forming and hold on to that keeps us locked in step with the samsara. And here we're understanding that samsara is in terms of our material existence in all of its forms, and then also that samsara, which is our own internal narrative about that existence. So samsara can be used in both ways. It's both the illusion outside and the illusion that we continues to sustain within through our mind, right? So through these contemplations only on what's out there, we can get confused and develop this whole internal dialogue that may or may not be true and is likely not absolutely true. So Adi Shankaracharya and his disciples in Bhaja Govindam laid out clearly all the ways in which our worldly attachments and our acquisitions and our identification with our roles and our relationships and even our sense and physical experience, as we just talked about, all can lead us farther and farther into delusion and farther away from knowing Govindam. This is also why verse 1, when this is chanted, verse 1 is repeated again and again. And it's reminding us, come back, Bhaja Govindam, because it's reminding us over and over. All of samsara is reminding us, no, you're separate. And we have to constantly remind ourselves again and again, Bhaja Govindam, turn your attention to the absolute. So our suffering, as we discussed, doesn't come only from the unpleasant and the negative repercussions of our choices, but also from those temporary pleasures that give us that momentary relief. And then when those temporary pleasures or that sukha is ceased, then we also get more sorrow and loss. So we think that we're avoiding dukkha. We think we're avoiding discomfort and pain and sorrow, and so we keep pursuing and grasping on to things that are comfortable and pleasurable through our senses and through our desire to take more and more, and then inevitably those things end, or they die, or they leave, or they stop, and oh, we're back in dukkha, we're back in sorrow. So everything, so one way or the other, we keep coming back to this dukkha principle, this discomfort, this pain, this sorrow. What does this tell us? That everything in this world, both the external and the internal, is temporary, it's fleeting, it's impermanent. And so it's impermanently fulfilling. It's not fulfilling, it's unfulfilling. It's impermanently complete. It's impermanently whole. It's impermanently healthy, and it's impermanently stable. So what are we seeking through this knowledge is something that is always fulfilling, that's always complete, that's always whole, that's always healthy, and that's always stable. And this is Govindam, and this is the self, and this is consciousness. So we're constantly shifting in samsara, even though we're grasping, we're clutching, and we're holding on to. What do we hold on to? What have we talked about that we hold on? We're clutching onto our bodies through our senses, through our health, through our pain. We clutch onto our relationships, through our attachments, through bringing people closer or farther apart by identifying ourselves with those relationships. I am the wife, I am the husband, I am the mother, I am the father, I am the brother, I am the person on this team, I am the coach or the player, I'm the politician. So where are relationships that we think that that's who we are? Situations, structures, even societies, these are things we're clutching, and these are things we're pursuing more and more. And most of all, we're clutching on to all of these things reinforce a wrong belief. That's what Bhaja Govindam is telling us, is that we're reinforcing through our clutching, we're actually reinforcing this wrong belief. And that's that our small personality, this ego self, our mind is the thing that's actually managing and controlling this chaotic experience. What happens in that? So everybody knows what happened. I mean, we all are living the experience of thinking that we're in control of this mind. And what does that lead to? Can anyone imagine what that leads to? Can anyone share it? Like, what's your experience of that? Mine is that I'm a lost and alone. That if my mind is the one that's controlling all of this, that if I am associated with all of this, then there I am. I'm lost, alone, and I'm isolated. This is that ignorance, the ignorance of separation. Does anybody else share that? Experienced it? Yeah. I see a few nodding heads. Has anyone even sometimes experience that? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Part of what we're exploring in this is how we can create more and more experiences of non-isolation, right? Until they flow together, until we become so stable in that. So we think we're filling that void. You're welcome to share in the chat, by the way, if you're joining us live. Please share in the chat if anything comes up for you. We're gonna have some time to talk about things. Yeah, first Rochelle shares that these separation feelings are painful. Yeah, yeah, that's that dukkha, right? So we think we're filling the void. We think we're filling that void with our senses and our churning thoughts and our nonstop actions in the world. Anyone engaging in nonstop action? Yes, hoping to stave off the inevitable impermanence and the collapse of that reality. Yes. So we think that as long as we stay on that path, that's called prayas. Yeah, and that as long as we stay on that path of prayas, we keep repeating these patterns again and again, right? So we know we have a limited time in the body. Adi Shankaracharya and his disciples are telling us to get on track, to know Govindam, to connect with the self, to get on this path of yoga and union now, while we have the capacity to do so. We have, as Zaina shares, we've all experienced a lot of suffering around aloneness and isolation. So we're increasing our suffering by attaching to the impermanent. Like, we know that it brings us suffering, and yet we keep doing it lifetime after lifetime. And so what's going to break this delusion? And here is where we enter verse 9 in reality. So having laid out this very convincing case for all the ways in which our grasping to the impermanent is going to lead us closer to our samsaric identification, um, leads us more into dukkha. Then we have the solid handhold. Um, so it says first from Satsangha in the company of good people. This is where it comes. This is where we start to need to understand who's the company of right people. The company of right people, as we learned in some previous verses, doesn't necessarily look the way we think it will look. If we identify with the clothes of the wise person, remember one of Adi Shankaracharya's disciples was saying that, essentially these people that look so wise, that have their hair in certain ways and wear certain robes, we think that they're wise, but actually they're doing it for a living, right? So we're warned against those false prophets. So understanding what is the actual company of right people. Acharya Shunya ji shared in one of these satsangas that satsanga is perhaps the most important sadhana or spiritual discipline in this life. And I find that really helpful. So many times we can get caught up in trying to, as sort of spiritual aspirants on a path, we may get caught up in trying to perfectly develop practices and sadhana and things of like, well, what are my morning rituals? How is my meditation going? How are all these things? And if we're attaching to those things with our mind, and if we don't, if we fail at those, doing it every day, that can cause a kind of a collapse of the ego too. And then we find ourselves going back to the world, right? Oh, I couldn't do it perfectly, or I couldn't do it in the right way. And so therefore I will collapse. And this is how the ego gets engaged in these things. But if we hold on to that first truth that satsanga is the most important sadhana, that being in this company of right people, and we'll talk about that in a second, that self-discipline is the most important one. It will change the way in which it changes everything. I'll say that. It changes everything. When people who are, ethically, spiritually sincere, acting ethically in the world, when without this company of right people, without this company of right knowledge, we're presented with a whole world that is reinforcing the other. So without those reminders, we will get lost. This is the idea. And so if we can do nothing else, if we can keep coming to this knowledge, keep coming back to this knowledge, keep being present with the teacher, keep being present with this truth. So first we have satsanga, the right people. They're people who are living in an ethical and dharmic way. This is a bare minimum, right? Bare minimum, we want to surround ourselves in good company. And so are you surrounding yourself with community that is harming you or others? So this is a bare minimum. Who are we spending our time with? There's a saying in alcohol and drug recovery circles of around that, who are we, the people we surround ourselves with, is a very quick determinant of where we are going, whether we're going to fall back into addiction, which is a kind of the sensory delusion. And it's so true of people, places, and things. So we want to first start being around communities and people that are also trying to find their stable self, right? So that's a first requirement of whether it's a true satsanga. And we're going to be doing a lot of teachings over the next year. Acharya Shunya is going to be starting in June with the teachings on karma yoga. And these are teaching from the Bhagavad Gita. And in those teachings, you'll have access to particular qualities that mark these dharmic qualities that mark whether we're able to be more in sattva or more in rajas and tamas, more in a calm centeredness that supports ourselves and others, or more in agitation or resistance. And so it's important, first of all, if you're familiar with yoga, these would be, are you surrounding yourself with people that are also pursuing a yogic path of union with the self and through yamas and niyamas first? Like, you're not harming others, you're doing the right thing, right? So then that's stable one. That's how you know, first of all, you're in satsanga. And then also, but we opened up this whole text with with an elderly gentleman who was fulfilled all of his dharmic obligations. He had fulfilled his roles, and he's doing something. He's becoming a Sanskrit grammarian, and still that wasn't enough, right? He's being called out by Adi Shankara. What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time like this? So just being dharmic isn't enough to be in satsang. Just being in the company of people that are doing the right thing, that are acting in an ethical manner, isn't quite enough. So what do we have to do? We have to run. It says, run to the company. The next verse will say that we have to run to the company of people that are also in possession of the truth of Govindam. And that is Sat. So we're talking about the value of Sat, of truth, of the self, of Sangha, our community, with people that also have that knowledge of the self. And the special jnanam, or knowledge of the self, comes from the Upanishads and the Antaveda, all these texts like this one that teach us the truth of the self, that everything is actually one divine consciousness. So we have to go be with other people who are able to discern this truth. All right. Yeah, and we have a chat saying there's a lot of people who do amazing healing things in community, but behind closed doors, they gossip or cheat or have addiction. So it can be confusing to find the right people. Yeah. So this is, we can do, in samsara, it's very possible to be doing things that appear ethical, that appear right, that appear helpful. And sometimes those things are coming from a good place. And they often, without this knowledge, they are coming without this knowledge that helps us to discern what to attach to, what to not attach to, then they will come hand in hand with all of the things that we're still attached to. So in this one area, we may not be attached. And then over here, we may still find ourselves being attached. And probably all of us have areas in our own life in which we are where we find it easier to let go. As we've explored these worldly attachments, we find it easier to hold with open hands. And then there's probably some areas in which probably not maliciously, but we find it more difficult, right? We find it more difficult to let go of those attachments. And that is true the whole world over. There are things that pull us more in this world, and then there are things that help pull us closer to Govindam. And so understanding how to find that right community is key. And so how do we discern this truth? This isn't a common knowledge. This is not the knowledge of the world. So it's revealed to us from another who has already become stable in that knowledge. So someone that has actively met all of those attachments, all of those identifications, and let go of those and integrated into this knowledge of self and has received this knowledge of the self. So they know where they're going. It's not just enough to let it all go. What are we left with? This verse is giving us a pathway. It's giving us a clear, okay, if you start here and then you go here and then you go here, then you will eventually get to this next place. And so the one who's become stable in that knowledge, so we can start to look, we can start to observe. This is part of there's a quality of shraddha or trust in the teacher, but in the context of Advaita, we always ask for a um, a trust, a functional trust. Can you observe? You should observe your teacher. You should observe the people around you in community. Are they able, is your teacher, in fact, mostly look at your teacher. Is your teacher able to embody this knowledge all the time? Are they able to be stable in this truth? Right? Don't forget, even in satsang, we're also all coming together with our varied levels of being able to be stable in this truth. So you don't necessarily want to look to the other person sitting next to you in satsang and say, well, they're not stable in truth and therefore it's not true. Can we look to who's giving this knowledge to us? Is it true? Is this person stable in it? So, the one who never forgets and is there shining that light of truth, that whoever shines that light of truth on our own darkness, that belief in our samsaric separateness, that's the darkness of our mind. It's not the individual actions, it's the way in which we allow this reality to that we identify with this partial impermanent reality. So and that we clutch onto that samsara. Again, I was talking to Kalyani before we started. Samsara is not holding on to us, we're holding on to samsara. So when it's about, like, if we let it all go, if we let samsara go and we know where we're looking, we know what to discern, then we can find that truth revealed within. So this is the importance of the guru. This is the importance of the teacher. So these right people that we're going to be in community with are those who are constantly reminding us and helping us to remember this truth of the self. Because our default experience in life is to spend every waking moment with people and experiences that remind us of our separation. It's only until we choose to surround ourselves with a different reminder that we begin to have more and more memory, more and more commitment to remembering. Um, so, this is where it really becomes important that we understand satsang, that it comes with, Acharya Shunya said, it's not just hanging out with people of good character, and the knowledge of self. Like, they have to have good character, they have to have knowledge of self, but it's something else. There's an action, there's a pathway and an action to satsang that we are exploring right now. First, Shravanam. We hear that truth from a qualified teacher. And then it's mananam. So satsang without contemplation is not really going to get us there. It's important to take that first step, because the more that we surround ourselves, the more the truth enters us, the more we listen, the more we have to contemplate, and the more likely we will contemplate. But we are also taking this as a direct action. Like, each of you who is attending today or attending or listening to the recording has taken the direct action to start mananam, to really start to hone their own contemplations. And we turn these teachings and understandings in community for a reason, right? Because it opens up our understanding beyond our personal experience in this lifetime. Okay, here's a question for you all. Have any of you or all of you noticed that when other people ask questions in class, you gain completely different insights? Have any of you noticed that these questions help you to gain something different? Does anybody want to share their experience? Can anybody remember a time that they really weren't even thinking? For me, you can type in the chat or raise your hand. For me, there have been times where I realized, like, oh, my mind doesn't even go in that direction. My mind didn't even think of that. And all of a sudden, like, oh, I didn't even know that people did think in that way. And now that I know that, that shines a light also on some unconscious ways that I also was thinking that I wasn't aware of. So we have our conscious awareness, and then we have our unconscious awareness. Has anybody else experienced this opening up through satsanga and through contemplation? Yeah, I see a few. Anyone want to share? You're welcome to. And if you want to raise your hand, you can do that as well if you want to share live. You can imagine one particular situation or not. Please share in the chat if you will, or raise your hand and we'll call on you. But while you're thinking on that, so we have Shravanam, that heard knowledge from the qualified teacher. We have Mananam, that way that we contemplate and we churn and we go through these, we really think on. So, like right now, we're going through individual verses and we're really thinking on them and we're trying to think on them in a different way than maybe our lived experience tells us. We're trying to go into the heart of these teachings. And then finally, it's Nididhyasanam. And Nididhyasanam is the way that we integrate this knowledge into our own life. It gives us these integration. How do we integrate any teaching? We integrate it through contemplation, through coming back. So, okay, so we had a contemplation, we heard the knowledge, we contemplated on it, we put it into action in the world, right? And then maybe we tested it and we couldn't understand it. So we come back. We come back to community and we ask that question and we do some more churning. And so this is nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam isn't always a one and done, right? It isn't that we necessarily I thought about it and came to a conclusion, and now I've integrated it, right? How many of us have, well, I thought I knew that. I thought I lived that, and I get trapped again. So we come back. So the importance of satsang is that it gives us an arena to keep churning that and to keep testing those things so that when we have questions, we can come back. When we've gotten caught up again in the spiral, when we've gotten caught up again in this samsara, we can break through it a little bit more. Yeah. All right. So think on that. So we're asked first in this to we're asked first in this verse to come to Satsangha, the company of good people, and from that action, those three ways of learning, that listening and contemplating and integrating, and maybe we come back to listening more, and maybe we come back to contemplating more. Through that, something emerges, as more and more, it's as more and more of this experience kind of hones us and purifies. Some of you mentioned purifying your ego and softening your ego. Through that process, something starts to evolve or develop. And it's nisangatva, or non-attachment. So we stop clutching to what is not real and impermanent. We open up. All of you have shared that you have experienced a softening in your holding, right? A letting go of some of these. We stop clutching, so we're less and less attached to this samsara. And then we can see through to the delusion that remains. And then we see through it to what is left after we let go and we let go and we let go. What's left? What's peeking through? What's emerging? Um, if we let that go and we do it with the knowledge of the eternal self, and our mind has that reminder again and again, then we change our habituated mental patterning, and that's called samskara. And in the space of non-attachment, what comes from this non-attachment is and it comes from a sadhana or practice of vairagyam, so we have this. There's two terms here. We have nisangatva, non-attachment, and we have vairagyam, which also is translated to non-attachment. But one is the experience and one is the practice, right? So we're going to talk about vairagyam in the next class. We're going to talk about the importance of vairagyam, which is that practice, that active practice of unattaching, and how important that is. And here, though, is a promise that if you keep doing these things, if you keep being in satsanga, if you keep churning, if you keep contemplating along with knowledge, that you will actually achieve a state of non-attachment. It will become consistent for you. You will become consistently not attached. Um, and and hold on one second, Deborah. I'm going to call you on one minute. So, this constant reminder of the truth or sat from one who is stable in the truth and shining that light of truth, which is Guru, and in the company of right people who are also self aware, this is Sangha, then we can find ourselves more and more in this constant state. All right, I have a question from Deborah. Please share.
I just wanted to share something. I felt like this morning I was getting primed for this class. In my morning meditation, I heard focus on your mind. And I thought, wow, which is difficult and it's also easy. I mean, when you totally focus on it, it's like the deer in the headlights. It goes, it kind of stops, it slows down. And it's like the mind wanders. And I was like, just kept hearing this, the mind wanders, let it go, don't follow, focus. And then the mind lingers, don't stay with it. It's nothing, just focus. And then if the mind dwells on anything, just allow it. Just focus. It's like I was being showed that the mind follows what is temporary, what's constantly changing. It does not focus on what is not, what is changeless or what is real. So Shankara, here I am, only accepts as real that which neither changes nor ceases to exist. And so then what is the reality behind all our experiences? He's saying there's only one thing that never leaves us, this deep consciousness. And that alone is the constant feature of all our experience. And that consciousness is the real self. It's the one, it's the truth, it's the Brahman. And so it was like this morning, and in this class, they're meshing, and it's, the world according to Shankara is like it is and it is not. You know, it has this fundamental unreality, but for us through these teachings, it can be understood in this. It's almost, and being in class like this is like a mystical experience. We're being shown and pointed to the experience of the illumined soul. And like when we experience that, when that truth is known, we are no longer deluded by the appearance. The snake appearance vanishes into the reality of the rope. The world vanishes into Brahman. And so, but the thing, in just hearing all this, it's like as long as your mind dwells upon nothing, there is nothing you can attach to.
Hmm.
If you want to understand, it's like when you're in, well, for me, this was when you're in meditation, I was being shown, it said, focus on your mind. But when I went there, it was quiet. It wasn't making judgments. That is, it wasn't thinking in terms of good, bad, or anything else. Whatever is past is past. Don't sit in judgment upon it. But, and then, but then the future, it hasn't here, but there, and even the present, it passes instantaneously. And it's like, so I was having this thought, okay, there's no past, there's no future, there's really no present. Don't be attached there. It just kept bringing me back, just be in that illumined place, like kind of headlight place. And I don't know, it's just, it seemed to really mesh with these teachings this morning. And I just was having that kind of, wow, that big aha of what Shankara's pointing to, that, the uncreated, that freedom there of just that of not being attached. And of course, this was just what I was experiencing. I have plenty of attachments, person, place, thing, whatever it is. But the way you presented this, it just lit up everything. And I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I think you brought up a few things that I wanna reflect on for people who are attending live and also for a recording that I think will be helpful. And you're absolutely right. And we're actually even going to be talking about a few of those things even further in today. But this idea of what Deborah brought up and I really appreciate this bringing up that it can get very heady when we talk about the divine consciousness, absolute reality, the self, and what are we talking about? I think what Deborah said really, like, yes, I want to remind us all, what is that? This self, as we experience the self in these teachings, is our inner witness. It is that part of us which is not the mind going about, it's not the senses going about acquiring feedback, information, and bringing it back. It's not the mind, which is producing thoughts and identifying with, oh, this tastes good and that feels good and I want that and I want that. It's the part of us that is also not the part that says, this is mine. These are my thoughts and this is my attachment and that's my relationship and my way of being and my way of doing. And it's not even the part that claims all of this as our own reality. It's not even the part that claims us as the self, as our small self, as I'm Sadhvi Aparna, and even that is not the self. Even these roles that we're given, even these relationships we sustain, all of these are not the self. So what is the self? The self is that the way we experience the self is through that inner witness. And that is the closest part of us that we can experience absolute reality, right? And so what Deborah also was sharing, she experienced a moment or an extended moment of the mind in which it was not hurrying or unstable. It was stable in truth. And this is going to come up in another verse if we get to, in this verse, Nischala Tattva. So Nischala, chala means unsteady, shaking, constantly moving. And Nischala is not moving. So this is what comes up next is, and this is part of this pathway. So we can become not only in this moment of our morning meditation, but in all moments, we can become stable in this truth of self awareness. And Acharya Shunya is taught many times on the Yoga Sutras. And one of the things about the Yoga Sutras that I think is important to realize is that it's a one text, one small text in the yoga pantheon of texts, and it advocates something called Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that says that meditation should be the complete cessation of thoughts. And that is not that's not the way that we meditate within this parampara. In this parampara, this teaching lineage, we don't, that's a very, we may get there to where there is no thought, but we're asked here instead to change the tenor of those thoughts, to focus on how, what is being in satsanga do? It helps us to change the nature of those thoughts, the qualities of those thoughts, the quality of the mind that's receiving and experiencing those thoughts. So if you are not able to achieve a complete cessation of thought, don't worry. This text is helping us to get there, and this verse 9 is helping us to is giving us the pathway and giving us the direction for it. Thank you, Deborah, for sharing that, your lived experience of that. Wonderful. All right, so we've experienced non-attachment when we've had that. So the more we're unattached to samsara, let's come back to this text, this verse, the more that we're unattached to samsara, the more that we're actually free of the delusion of samsara. So we not only, like, once we start to be unattached, we can experience, as Deborah shared, we can experience moments where we're free of the delusion. We really are able to be stable in that and that freedom and that compulsive drive. We don't have that compulsive drive of our senses and our uncontrolled mind to seek fulfillment externally in the impermanent. So this is called nirmohatvam. And once we have nirmohatvam, we have a stable discernment, right? We're able to be kind of solid and stable in our understanding. We can see what is impermanent, and then we don't get fooled by it, right? So we see it come in, we experience it, but we're not thinking that's absolute truth. And then when we don't have to be in this constant distraction mode, these experiences come and go. We're not avoiding the experiences of life. The experiences come and go. We live, we eat, we play, we work, but we aren't doing so in this state of isolation from that inner witness, right? We are connected to our inner witness, and therefore we know what is not that, right? So we're free from the delusion. We aren't alone in the forest anymore. We're not being buffeted on those waves of samsara. We see what is. Deborah shared a really powerful experience of a moment of freedom, an extended moment of freedom, even in that samsara. And she also shared what happened in her mind, which was going to be a question I was going to ask you all. So if you all want to share, has anyone else, and share it in the chat, has anyone else experienced moments of freedom in the mind? Have you already had that freedom of being able to sustain your inner, or have you sustained your inner witness for even a few moments? Yeah, we have a share already. Pragya shares, thank you, Deborah, for sharing. I have a similar experience of when observing the mind decides to stop thinking. This is as part of my process to get to Sakshi, the inner witness, and the Tattva Bodha meditation technique shared by Acharya Shunya. Yeah, you can find that on, I know, within our member portal and possibly on YouTube as well. So with that, and that meditation involves a contemplation on how I am not this body, I am not this breath, I am not these thoughts. So there's an act, and this is being led by the wise person. There's an active practice of separation, of detaching, of disassociating from even those things that are so intimate, like our breath, where we think we are the next breath. We think we are this body machine. We think we are our thoughts. We think we are our mind, but we are not that. Contemplating on that again and again can move things. So in that space of non-attachment, once we start seeing what is impermanent and knowing what is eternal, once we start connecting more and more with that, we stop being swayed by these external drives and these external projections, and we find ourselves stable and centered in self. And then this self-settledness is called Nischala Tattvam, as we discussed. So the Nischala Tattvam, and we talked about how it's not to be shaky. And what are we not being shaky in? Our understanding of Tattvam, that eternal truth of the self. So that is that ability to be Nischala Tattvam, Tattve is not only is it self-settledness, but it's also a key hallmark. We were asking, how do we know if we're in Satsangha? It's a key hallmark of the teacher, of the guru, of the one who is wise. Are they stable? Someone that you're in community with, are they stable in their understanding of self? Do they get easily swayed by external circumstances? That's something to pay attention to. That's something to question. But if they stay stable in that self and are able to be that shining light, well, then you might be in Satsanga. So look for more stability in yourself when you're in community, and more stability in the community or the teacher itself. So this is all practice that comes from this practice of being in a community of truth, being in right company, and finally something can happen. And this is where this verse tells us the the beautiful fruit and the taste the divine taste at the end of this journey is something may happen within all this, and it's called Jivan Mukti, and that's liberation of the ego self. And Jivan Mukti means that we're still alive and we're experiencing this liberation of the self within our lived experience right now. And when we're in this state, it means we're in a state of being fully identified with the light of the self. We're no longer identified with samsara. We are always identified with the light of the self. And so we can experience samsara, we can experience the world, but we don't associate, so we're not associating with it in the sense of we're not identifying who we are through those experiences. We have them, but we know who we are. We know the truth of who we are. We know our divine self. We are the inner witness. And then if we're really stable in that, we get to actually, if we're so stable in it that it doesn't, that we always identify with it, what happens? We get to be a light. We actually get to be a light for others. We can become a stable beacon, never to be lost again. So this is the path. This is the why and the how, right? And this verse, keep coming back to this verse because it's so important, because it gives us the parameters. Now we've received the parameters of how we get messed up, how we get lost, and now this is the parameters of how we find ourselves. So it's a really important verse to come back to again and again. This is our primary contemplation for picking up. Yeah. So then the next verses that we're going to look at are really just supporting this one verse. And before we're going to go into a contemplation soon together. But before we do that, let's look at verse number 13. Yeah. Verse 13, and I think we explored this earlier as well, in terms of how it's connected to material acquisition. But the translation of this verse says, "Oh, madman, why this engrossment in thoughts of wealth? Is there no one to guide you? There's only one thing in the three worlds that can save you from this ocean of samsara. Get into the boat of satsang, the company of good people, quickly." Yeah. That's another hammer. Come on. Come on. Okay, now we know what satsanga is. This is a hammer. What are you wasting your time on? What are you getting lost in? Why keep getting lost in it? There's only one thing in our material reality, in our subtle reality, and in our causal reality, and that reality that informs our karma from lifetime to lifetime. There's only one thing that's going to get us through that. Bor Bhuva Swaha. The only thing that can get us through that and across this ocean, this turbulent ocean of samsara, this 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 delusion, this thing that keeps wrapping us again and again, lifetime after lifetime, and in this lifetime, experience after experience. Only one thing is going to get us through that, and it says, "Hop into the boat of satsanga. Hop into this boat. Get into this vehicle." Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that Rochelle was brave enough to share that she also occasionally gets caught in this engrossment in the material objects. We live in a time in which it's really easy to be not only entranced but rewarded for our pursuit of material acquisitions. We're taught that our safety lays there. We experience that as well. We experience that our material acquisition gives us value and merit. It gives us survival, and ultimately can give us identity. Um, so I think I was thinking about how the first thing we ask for in this society, in the United States of America, when you first meet somebody, you ask, well, what do you do? And what we're asking is, what do you do for money? How do you achieve material? How do you achieve material safety and security? And how does that give you value? And therefore, how do I know how to position you in my mind? What is your identity as related to your pursuit of material acquisition? It's when we look at it, right? We all know that's the first thing. Yes. 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 We all know. So like that is so hammered in. And this is where kind of exploring these again and again and from different patterns lets us see where our blind spots can be in samsara, where we don't necessarily think when we're just, hanging out and enjoying a beautiful spiritual experience, we don't necessarily realize how identified we are with these things, but it's all around us. The ocean is drowning us. We're the fish in the dirty water. This is what samsara is. And so even 1200 plus years ago, they identified that this is one of the ways. And so what we're doing for money, like, you fool, it's happening. It happened 1200 years ago. It happened probably 5,000 years ago. It continues to happen as long as we are identifying in this way. The power of this is that it's saying, you madman, you fool, you madman, you crazy person. It's identifying this is pathological. What are you doing? We don't even realize it's pathological until we're drawn our attention to it. And so this is why the second question, this question is there no one to guide you? Who are we guided by? The people around us, right? So we're constantly supporting ourselves in samsara with people that are surrounding us, societies, cultures, mores that are reinforcing samsara. This really hones it in. Like, okay, so you have to actively choose to get out of that and into a different surrounding, into a different consciousness, into a different awareness. Otherwise, we're unlikely to change. So let's see. So we all know that we have to be exposed to the truth of the truth of the self, and because we easily forget in samsara, so easy to forget. Yeah. Let's see. And so we're also, again, we're also touching on in this verse. He's touching on to that quality of time. Someone else remarked in the chat around time as well, and that time is limited because we have a physical being. And so the sooner that we stop distracting ourselves, the better. The sooner that we jump into the company of wise people, the better. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee of how much time we have. Right now we know we have the ability to do this. Right now we know we have the ability, as Deborah said, to sit down and contemplate, and we have the mental stability to do this. We can show up. We have internet connection. We have a teacher. We have knowledge from over 1,200 years ago coming to us, bright and shiny and new. So we have this one moment, and we're challenged to do that. So we're challenged because in this moment of death, as we've talked about before, in this moment of death, in a blink of an eye, whatever we're thinking of in those last moments is going to determine the quality and the nature of the next lifetime. And also in our everyday lived experience, it determines the quality of the next experience, right? We're always determining the quality of the next experience. If we're identified in this way, that's all we can see, whatever way it is. And So we want to remember. We always want to be remembering who we are and being connected to that inner witness self. Wonderful. All right. So the next verse is verse 30. Again, we're not going to go into this. I just wanted to heighten the part of this that says, that declares these are ways we can regulate the pranas, the life forces, remain unaffected by external influences, and discriminate between the real and the fleeting. Chant the holy name of God and silence the turbulent mind. Perform these with care, with extreme care. So, this is talking about Upasana yoga practices, which we will dive into a little bit more later. But I wanted to heighten that. What do you think this? We have these practical Upasana yoga practices, and they help to keep us rooted in sattva, and they give us the tools to navigate this journey, right? We're not of the mind, the journey of the mind, from being wrapped up in the senses and our experiences in samsara and our constant projections of this dream of reality. And then these practices help us to come to a stable state of mental well-being. And then in that state of mental well-being, Zaina, you would ask, like, how do we know? Well, the more we practice these things, the more we come to an inner sattvic stability, and the more we're able to perceive and discriminate between permanent and impermanent, or Govindam and samsara. So I wanted to ask you all. It says start here with care, with extreme care. So clearly it's not to be taken lightly. What do you all think? Why are we asked to engage with extreme care? Let's open this up. No wrong answers. We're contemplating right now. Anyone? Anyone want to take a chance? Raise your hand. Okay, Kalyani.
A couple of things came to mind. One is, as we talked about earlier with some sensory experiences, that these practices, if immediately taken to a very high extreme, right? Some yoga asanas, are you doing it quote unquote better than the next person? Are you able to go deeper into that pose, right? There's this tendency, if we don't come back to the reason we are engaging in the practices, or like with some dhyana, with the meditation. Well, you meditated for 20 minutes and the other person meditated for an hour. You have to go for an hour and a half, what have you, right? That they can also become these egoic these practices done from an egoic place, rather than done from this place of stability and inner connection to the witness, and knowing why we're doing them, from where these sattva can be cultivated. So that's one thing that came to my mind. And then also, I suppose, like, there can also be, again, in this chasing, we can I think you had mentioned earlier too about this thinking of, oh, I didn't do it this one day, or perhaps feeling, even turning that into like a vasana, like an unhealthy compulsion. I have to do this one and this one and this one, and having to do so many of them, and again, just losing the sight of necessarily of like why it is that they're being done, and are they becoming this mechanical, or this status symbol for our ego, as opposed to an actual yoga that is helping us on our journey to self-realization. So those are a couple of things which came up for me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that resonates for me as well. That understanding that we can, again, we had these verses about how to not necessarily look to someone who looks, who appears to practice austerities and yet still holds on to the passions within the heart, who's still lost in the, in those inner passions for the world. That was an earlier verse that we talked about. And Kalyani, thank you for bringing that up. It is it's that you can do these practices, but the fact that these practices, first Adi Shankaracharya says, wait, go, Satsangha is the way. Satsanga is the way. And then within that, you can practice these things. And yes, practicing these things will help you to remind, but take care. Be very careful. We have some shares in the chat. Yes, to be aware of your intent. And also to keeping the mind steady. Take care of the mind and its thoughts, keeping our thoughts sattvic. Yeah, keeping honed in. So it's not just the practices. Again, it's like we talked about before. It's not just being, it's not just looking a certain way or practicing a certain way. It's doing it in conjunction with why we're doing it and what we're going to and where we're shooting for it. So it's not just continuing another slightly more evolved or beneficial or seemingly sattvic way of being. It's really, is this supporting our path to self, or is it supporting our path to more and more that ego identification? Pragya shares also she was thinking similarly, so it doesn't become an egoic exercise. Yeah. Would anybody else like to share anything that came up for them with that? Carefully. Take care. Take extreme care. You can raise your hand in the chat if you are. There's other teachings that this brought up for me around, other deeper yogic teachings around how as you follow a Upasana yoga path, or a Raj yoga path, you may develop certain siddhis or certain capabilities and powers, they say. And Advaita Vedanta says, don't get lost in those powers. Don't get distracted by the powers, and don't use these natural things, that purification practices that do bring us more into a purified sense of still what is impermanent, to get distracted from what is permanent. Soham shares in the chat, it also sounds a bit of a warning, pointing to the power of pranayama. Yeah, and its ability to cause imbalance, which is also another way to strengthen the ego. Yeah, these physical practices can lead, there are sacred practices, and if we're pursuing them with our ego identification, we may do too much. We may not listen to the teacher. We may overdo it. We may cause physical imbalance and physical ill health from overextending to serve our desire for more and more and more, to serve our ego and to serve our insecurity. So yeah, there are actually physical reasons why one especially with pranayama, how we can throw ourselves a little off balance with these powerful ways of metering the physical breath, thinking that we're metering our connection to the divine, but really we're actually addressing the physical component of it only. Yeah. If anyone else would like to share, you are welcome to. We have a few more minutes. Yeah. Yes, and David shares that he's learning that how you do something is as important as what you are doing. Absolutely. So that determines the flavor of our consciousness, our thoughts rather. And is it being informed by our inner witness self, or is it being informed by more of those thoughts? And which thoughts are they? Yeah, thank you. Shweta, would you like to share?
Jai Ma. This verse 30 about practicing pranayama, pratyahara, it can become almost obsessive I've observed it in myself where I start the day now with my mantras and, warm water, and I have these little rituals that bring me a lot of peace, but there are times when if my day doesn't go that way, then I kind of lose, everything feels chaotic. It's like it anchors me, which is a good thing, but it also annoys me when those things don't happen. And so I think you could get caught up in that expectation that, my day has to be like, you could become very rigid with these practices where if you're not doing your meditation and you're not doing your proper diet and your rituals and your whatever you do, like, oil pulling, like everything
Yeah.
else goes. And I think somebody, maybe Deborah or somebody had brought this up in the past that if they don't do their morning meditation, like the whole day could go to chaos. And I think that's why the extreme care, like the goal is not these practices. The goal is to detach, and that detachment could even be to these practices. They're there initially as tools and as anchors to kind of guide you down the sattvic path, but the the following of sattva shouldn't itself become this obsession and this compulsion.
Beautiful. Yeah, that when we talk about the qualities of the mind, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. So these are three kind of states of being the mind can have. We can be in Sattva, which is that balanced, centered self, which is capable of discernment, proper discernment. And so is capable of saying, like, oh, actually, I need to pull back a little. I'm attaching here. I'm not attaching. But also, we have these other qualities, these qualities of rajas, which is this agitation. What's in this drive and this need to do more and more and more. So there's that quality of the mind, that perfectionism, that desire. It can easily turn into that if we are not paying attention. And then tamas, which is that other quality of the mind, which is sort of resistance and inertia. And so if we, and Rajas and Tamas go like this, they go up and down, up and down. As long as we are identifying with samsara, as long as we're identifying with our experiences in the world, we can teeter-totter on that scale of from agitation to collapse, from collapse to to moving more and more and wanting to include it, and until we collapse, until we're forced to collapse. And so that is exactly, so we're trying to heighten sattva, but we have to also be ever persisting in our inner witness self. And this is why Satsangha is the first and primary sadhana. So come back to the truth of what is. Come back to the truth. And if you find yourself, as many of us have, feeling like I got to do this and I got to do that, and well-meaning, I'm gonna do all these things, then if you pay attention to that tendency in yourself, because that's a tendency of how your mind has developed. That's a tendency or a samskara. It's a pattern of being. So if you know that's a pattern of being, and in this moment you recognize that in yourself, write it down, remind yourself, keep coming back to it. For someone else, it may be something different. For someone else, it may be, I can't get out of bed. I don't do this. I don't do that. I don't want to start meditation, or I don't want to start this. And so pay attention to that tendency. That would be a slightly more tamasic tendency. It doesn't mean that we're locked in step with that. We always have the ability to come back to that stable, centered self. And the easiest way to do that is to surround ourselves with right knowledge. So if you can do nothing else but show up to class or play a satsanga, we're living in a golden age where we get to hear the words of our teacher again and again. This is most important, because this will set us right back, to read the words of Adi Shankaracharya, come back, come back, come back. Zaina, would you like to share?
Hi. Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what Shweta was saying. I've been listening for the first time to Sovereign Self, and And something that Acharya Shunya was saying was, this idea, how it landed for me is kind of like the map is not the territory, and also like the boat is not the destination. So I have a tendency in the past, it's like I had these yoga classes that I love, and they made me feel so grounded and like so deeply connected and like reflected, reflective. And then the times changed, and the teachers changed, and I was so upset because I was doing them every single day for months, and then I stopped going to the studio, and then I love having silence in the morning, and it reminded me of the story in the book about like the man who like needs silence, and I don't need it all the time, but I become extremely irritable if my morning has like loudness in it. I like to have my tea and light my incense and like and be quiet, but it also can become a prison, and it affects my relationships because a lot of people can't be quiet in the morning. So, especially my family, my mom when she visits. So, it was a good reflection of like these things that can be really beautiful and helpful and nourishing, but when I start to grip them so like rigidly, they imprison me, and they like and then they create tension in my relationships. So it's just been like a good mirror, even these things that seemingly are beautiful on the surface, seem like spiritual practices or rituals, like they can take a left turn down like a dark alley. So yeah.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I think this is again what we can do is recognize that even within sattva, we're still talking about the mind. We're still talking about the mind. Like it's still the mind is the apparatus. The senses are the information, the mind is the apparatus, but the self, if we know the self, is the one that is helping us to determine how to use that mind. So the mind thinks it's dominant, the mind thinks it knows. And this is why the gunas, or those qualities of the mind, even those are even sattva, even that extreme, beautiful, present self is also a kind of a bondage. It is because, even in the pursuit of like, I want to be more and more sattvic, we can find ourselves a little more bound, a little more bound. This is also why in Vedic meditation, where it's not about letting go of all the thoughts, it's about observing and coming back, observing and coming back. So as you're having these, I know that sound is a big trigger for me. It's a big trigger for my mind to get engaged. Can I also observe the sound, and what does it mean to be identified with samsara? Identification with samsara is being thrown off because samsara doesn't reflect what we want it to. We have an expectation of how it should be, and then it doesn't show up in that way, and we're mad, and then we fall into confusion, and then we forget we are not that samsara. So when we say we're identified with something, or we're associated with samsara, or we're associated with these worldly attachments, it means that we forget, we can't remember that we are not that. That's what it means to be identified. So the more that we can remember. What are we remembering? We're remembering the self. We're remembering the truth of who we are. How do we do that? We enter a state of witnessing. And it can be a moment to moment to moment experience. There I am settled. There I am not. There I am settled. There I am not. And so moment to moment experience. And that's how we do it. That's how the process works. Yeah. And staying connected again and again, even, it can get, it can feel like our ego mind wants it done yesterday. Right. And that's an attachment to time, or an attachment to how long it should take. And I always comfort myself with the knowledge that, well, I've probably been here for hundreds of thousands of years. I've probably been going through so many lifetimes. And if it takes me another 5 seconds to bring my attention back, And it takes me another, or another 30 minutes of a meditation to bring my awareness back, or another experience but with remembering, wait, I am not that. I am not this fight I'm having with my partner. I am not this, I am not this loud noise, construction noise outside. I am not all of these things. So be it, because I'm remembering. Yeah. And eventually that will lead to a non-attachment. That's the point of verse 9. It will, stick with it. Keep with it. You will find that space. If you keep doing it, you will find that space. We have a few final shares in the chat. Pragya has been sharing she's been using Insight Timer to time her meditation. But with a consecutive days timer, it kind of feeds her ego issues. So when she has a streak, she feels good. And when she breaks a streak, she feels bad. Yeah, right there. It's so interesting how these tools. So in Adi Shankaracharya's time, the tools were, the tools were one thing. And now we have some additional tools. And also we can get distracted even with that. Amarika shares that attending satsang and returning to the teachings are very helpful when a feeling of self-sabotage or tamas creeps in. Just going to sit in front of my altar when I do not feel like meditating is one thing I do to hold on to the path. Yes, a lot of times, self included, I have to, that part of me, which is my buddhi, which isn't necessarily my enlightened self, but it is my higher discerning contemplative self that is aware. That self, sometimes I have to pick myself up like a mother cat to a kitten and take myself over to my altar or my other altar or my other, I have to sit myself in front of it and just sit, just be, just put my attention. And it's something that I have an active practice of. It's also something that I've tuned into when I'm feeling most sad or most disconnected. That's my time. Oh, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling separate. I'm feeling separation. And I know that the ultimate ignorance is that feeling of separation without being able to see that I am always connected. And so what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to just step one, sit in front of the altar, sit in front of that, sit yourself down, be in that higher awareness. And even if you feel like you couldn't possibly do it in that moment, you might find that just by committing to presence, committing to being the company of truth, in devotion, in bhakti, in a feeling of connection, cultivating that connection, instantly you come back to that truth, come back to that self. This is where that Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. We sing, we draw our attention, we connect, we feel, we devote ourselves to that ultimate truth. And sometimes it's as simple as just picking our physical body up and going and sitting in front of an altar, or sometimes it's closing our eyes and tuning out the loud noises around us, or sometimes it's looking at the post-it notes that you've placed to remember you, but always it's coming back to truth and coming back to that community of truth. Yeah. All right, we're going to get into verse 32 in another day, but essentially that final verse is the summary of this teaching. And so it says, a fool engrossed in the study of grammar and entangled in the rules of language remains ignorant. But upon being awakened by the teachings of Shankara's disciples, his narrow vision is cleansed and he is shown the true light, as are all of us. So again, we see the value of Sat, we see the value of Sangha, and we see the value of Guru. May we carry this forward again and again into our own life. So whether we're studying grammar or whether we're getting lost in other pursuits of the world, however seemingly dharmic, when those pursuits cause us to forget the truth of who we are, we can get unstable, shaky. And when we come back and remember, and when we listen to the words and the teachings of the Guru, when we contemplate upon them, and then when we put them into action in our own life, in community, we will find that our narrow vision is cleansed, our focusing only on the impermanent is removed, and we have non-attachment, and we start to become, we see the light and we start to become a light. Jai Ma. Beautiful to have this Sangha with you all in pursuit of truth and light. I would like to invite our community member, our in this Satsangha, in this wider Satsangha with Acharya Shunya, I'd like to invite our community member, Kalyani, to lead us in a closing prayer together. Jai Ma.